Hello, everybody. Hello. So lovely to be here again. It's lovely to greet you all, to see you joining. I love watching your names come up. I love how it makes me feel as if we're all here together. I'm happy to be here again with you this evening. I've been looking forward to it today. As always, I've really loved the comments that have come in over this last week. It greatly helps, to plan ahead and work out what it is that we're going to be talking about, that which you would like for us to focus on. It comes from you. And the only way I can know about it is through connection with you all after or before we do this. So I've made a decision, I think, that for the next few weeks at least, I'm going to continue to do these Monday night lives. I said to you last week, I was surprised when I first agreed to do it. I thought, never. So it fascinates me that I look forward to it now. And it pleases me hugely when you get in touch afterwards and say how much you've enjoyed it. I'm curious how many of you discovered our new YouTube channel last week. That in the discovery of using IT, how to save a live and how to actually add it to our YouTube channel. So it's Mindful Me, our channel, and there are several things saved on it, and there will be more in the future, but it's wonderful to think that these lives just don't have to die after 24 hours, but that we can keep them. So I'm really happy about that. Be interesting looking at what it is that we put on it from now on. But don't you just love all of this changing of technology and moving forward with things? I loved it in the early days when computing first arrived. I can't remember when I first really decided that I would go ahead with trying to understand using computers. And so for a time I learned HTML programming as a way of writing a website. And I loved it. And I've often thought, when I come back in another lifetime, I think I'd like to be a computer programmer. It makes me laugh, the thought of it. Lovely to see you all joining. How much it just brings warmth to me to see your face, to see your names instead of your faces, and put faces to those names. So I hope you've all got pen and paper to write with, because as part of the topic tonight, I've had some very interesting quotes that I like to live by, and I feel quite sure that you might too if you could write them down. So I hope that you've got pen and paper. If you haven't, rush off and get some now. We at Mindful Me use journals. I love that we can hand them out to people. We have them made with the Mindful Me cover changes regularly, and whenever you come to a workshop here, we hand a journal out and suggest that people write in them and use them. So as I've said before, I begin these live sessions with notes, which I never refer to. It's so funny. So during the day beforehand, I write a few notes, and somehow or other I never get to use them. So I end up at the end of the session absolutely thrilled to bits at learning some new things myself, because they've arrived while we've been speaking. Now you know that we'll go again next week and run a workshop to deepen the topic. And Kirsty, who works with me in the Mindful Me team, will be really happy for you to contact her and ask if you can join that. So get in touch with Kirsty just by emailing kirsty@mindfulme.me and say, I would like to continue this topic by taking part in the workshop on Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock. It is, of course, on Zoom. I'm even enjoying Zoom these days. So the topic for this evening is called Facing Into Uncertainty. facing into uncertainty is what we're all doing. Learning how to face into uncertainty. We've been at it now for some weeks. And I'd imagine if you look back and have a look at where you're at today in contrast to where you were, let's say, back in February, you would be able to say that you've navigated a lot of changes. Is this true for you? It certainly has been for me. A lot of learning, a lot of self-discovery, a lot of readjustment. Yes? It's been quite an astonishing time, hasn't it? It's taken us from doing this in living rooms and other meeting places where we can all be together to this form of separateness, which in a very odd way we've managed to achieve togetherness in. I experience that. And each day as I'm talking with people in Zoom sessions, I'm discovering the level of closeness and connection that we can achieve when we actually really open to each other. The majority of the conversations are around uncertainty. Hugely so. So where are we going to go with this topic? How are we going to navigate a pathway where we can actually face into uncertainty? I thought I would use a rather splendid personal story to demonstrate it tonight. I'm not sure how clearly you can see, but I think if I take my glasses off for a moment, you might see that I've actually got a black eye at the moment. It's vastly healed than it was a few days ago. Really? Yes, I can see it still. Every now and again, people who know me well say, "Oh, Helen, what's happened to your face?" Someone said to me a couple of days, "Who punched you? Who punched you?" So it looks as if I've been punched in the face, but I have to tell you, I tripped and fell. I landed on the road. It really is a funny story. It's all about facing into uncertainty. So I'll tell you about it. Because I'm obedient to the laws of the land, you know, because I'm over 60, I'm not allowed out. So I have been in my apartment doing the kind of exercises you need to do, feeling the fitness that I achieved through walking disappearing. And so I made the decision that early in the mornings I will walk. I need to move my body. We all do. But I value my fitness because, of course, if my body is working well, so is my heart and my mind. So I put on my walking shoes and, naughtier still, took a water bottle with me because in Ramadan we know that's not a wise thing to do or kind. And off I went on my very local, friendly neighbourhood walk early in the morning. What happened as I was walking and just about to turn off a fairly mainish road was that a police car drove past, and suddenly I had this startling thought that I'm being naughty, I'm not meant to be out anyway, and I'm not meant to be carrying water. So I turned quickly, hastened my steps and walked much faster, tripped on a piece of uneven pathway and fell flat on my face. Well, I didn't actually, I fell flat on my knees. So if you think my face looks odd, you should see my knee. Down I went really hard, and because I don't have the fitness that I normally do in my body, I couldn't help it and my face hit the road. I had my mask on and quite large sunglasses, so I think that this black eye is the result of my sunglasses actually connecting with my cheek. Was I expecting it to happen? No. I was going for a quick walk early in the morning. I came back with my face mask in place, took it off when I opened my door, and it was covered in blood, and oh no, I was bleeding everywhere. So wet flannel to the face, looked in the mirror and ascertained where it was all coming from, looked at my knee, felt quite shaken up and thought, how really interesting. I feel like a small child, we all do when we fall. But what I noticed more than anything was what went through my mind. Oh no, I don't want this to happen. I hadn't planned for this to happen. Who would? Who plans to fall? That whole sense inside of me of, oh no, and I heard myself call it out as I fell. Oh no, I cried. I was certain, I imagine, when I left home, that I would walk and arrive back into my doorway again, having enjoyed the walk and get on with my day. It actually meant getting in touch very quickly with Kirsty and saying, I've fallen and actually I'm bleeding and I'm quite shaken up and I can't actually go on with my work today, so very sorry, I have to take a day off and look after myself. And I sat on and off during the day and thought about the impact of uncertainty in our lives. Now I want you all to know that I'm feeling fine. The bruising is going away. I heal really quickly because I bruise really easily and quickly too. So although it looked colourful to begin with, you can see it's healed actually really well. And so is my knee, just in case you were concerned. But do you understand how that relates to certainty and uncertainty? You see, we, all of us, need to feel safe. And so we plan certainty. So I'm quite sure of various things that are going to happen. Well, we've planned them. We've organised it. We've written notes about it. We've bought tickets for it or whatever it is. But you know what's really interesting is that many of the plans that we make and of the notions we have of safety for our future fall to pieces. It's a common way of living. You know that it is. That things change. The weather alters things. Car accidents alter things. People change their minds. Things we want aren't available. Life happens. The one thing we can all be very certain about is that we can't be certain. And once you learn how to embrace that as a way of seeing, once you really learn how to embrace that uncertainty is how life is constructed and change continually happens, then the way you experience life alters. I can't remember when I first began to recognise uncertainty, but it probably was in my childhood still, when I discovered life changed so constantly that the only certainty was, as little Annie sings on the show, Annie, the sun will come up tomorrow, and some days it doesn't even do that. It's raining instead. It's interesting that safety and certainty holds hands with each other. But if I was to do what I often ask you, write down the word certainty now, and underneath it, begin the word association that happens for you. Certainty. So what are all the words that mean certainty? And what are all the words that you would associate with uncertainty? And what exactly are we looking at here when we talk about being uncertain? You see, we thought that we were living with certainty before the great change of the COVID virus happened, and how quickly that swept through, that our lives altered for many of us drastically and beyond belief. We believed that we were living with much more certainty. And when you step back a bit, you recognise that actually that is an attitude that makes it easier for us to live more peacefully, more safely within ourselves. But it doesn't hold much truth. Just as choosing to go for a walk and discovering you've fallen when you hadn't planned it, many things change. On the same day that I was shaken, I went to cook something, and I opened a cupboard and took out a Pyrex measuring jug, actually, it's a jug, and it slipped because I was shaky and it dropped. And of course I have tile floor, don't I, in my kitchen, and it smashed into a million pieces. And I thought again as I was sweeping it up, that's another thing I hadn't planned. And it does show me that I'm shaky and that I need to rest. I seldom break things. And again I thought, oh, this is just another marker of uncertainty. Simple things in our life change all the time. Now, you know, we all believe that knowing will make us feel safe and peaceful. But what is knowing? Uncertainty is about unknowing. And when you really take a step back and you look into unknowing, do you realise that the word open arrives? That in knowing is openness of heart, of seeing, of experience. Do you see that knowing narrows and unknowing opens and widens? Have you thought about it like that? That embracing unknowing opens our minds to a vast array. Had you thought about it? That certainty actually narrows things down. And unknowing and change open both your heart and your thinking mind. This is the practice of mindfulness. Recognizing that we associate knowing with the word control. I need to have control. If I had control, if I can control outcomes, bank accounts, the children, my partner, my career, what I'm learning, who I know, how I live my life, if I can control that, I feel safe. So to move from control into out of control feels chaotic. But you know, I'll tell you what Eckhart Tolle says about this. His simple sentence is, when you become comfortable with uncertainty, infinite possibilities open up in your life. Why, he asks? Because it means that fear is no longer a dominant factor. When you become comfortable with uncertainty, it's fear that drops away. So when our lives are lived by fear, under fear, in the rule of fear, as mindfulness teachers, we teach that when fear arrives within us, it means that we have left the present moment and our knowingness of what's here exactly now and moved either into the past or into the future, which is the land of the unknown. Now we mitigate and medicate the unknown by planning and feeling as though we can control our choices. For a while I've had a vast yearning to have lots of fresh broccoli, and the supermarket has had no broccoli for 10 or 12 days. Suddenly I want it because it's not available. I'm happy to tell you that a lovely fresh load arrived yesterday. But it's interesting how immediately we want what we cannot have. When it's no longer certain, we want it. Isn't that an interesting thing? When you know it's here in its abundance, well, then you can just leave it be. So we know that certainty is about control and about managing fear. But what I want to talk to you about is the fact that you really can learn to lean into uncertainty. How is a very interesting thought. So I'm going to tell you two rather interesting quotes. My chiefest way of living my life is what I often describe as a little bit of Buddhist theory. We're often taught that in the mornings when we first wake up, it is a good idea to set a plan or some goals for the day. I say instead, set an intention. Rather than narrowing the pathway into a goal, set an intention that today you would like to operate out of the highest, best potential that's possible for you. So if each morning you greeted the day with, I am open to my highest best, then here is what I do. Setting a goal and living to it narrows down the way I see, because then it means that I can only work towards what's in my thinking mind. So here is my plan or my goal. If instead I change the direction of my hands and ask for, may I live into my highest best of all possibilities today and highest potential. And then here's the next piece. May I then let go all of my attachment to all outcomes. Let go any attachment I may have to any perceived outcome. That would allow this vast field of possibilities that exists far beyond my thinking mind and my capabilities in this moment. This field of possibilities that exists so far beyond, and that within it holds ideas, possibilities, potentialities that I know nothing about. Let me live there. So I'll say it again to you. Instead of setting a goal for the day, set an intention that I might live into my highest potential. And in doing so, that I might let go any attachment I might have to any outcomes, and instead allow the gigantic field of possibilities that exists far beyond my thinking mind. So that takes you to places that you could never have dreamed of, but that opens both your mind and your heart. To set a goal and to aim along it keeps you only with what you know. So knowing this, of course, it makes you feel as though you're in control, but to allow a great field of possibilities that you haven't even thought of means that an openness of mind and an openness of heart arrives in ways that we can be encouraged to live into. Now, I don't remember now when I first began to embrace that as my morning routine, but it really starts like this. At the end of my morning meditation practice, I do this. Offer up that I might live into my highest potential today. Let go my attachment to any outcomes and instead open into the field of possibilities that exists far beyond my comprehension. I like to live beyond. If you were here last week, you'll know I suggested that we think of meditation as beyond. I love that way of seeing. I love the notion of opening my heart rather than being closed to things. So that means I open my heart not only to the possibilities of doingness, but of beingness. It helps me to look for potentiality in people. It helps me to look for the highest potential and possibilities. It helps me to look beyond. I don't want to live in the field of certainty because I can only be certain with what I think I know. I want to live in the field of uncertainty if it contains opening that's beyond any that I could imagine. When I apply that to this current situation, I recognise it keeps me looking out to what could arrive, not fear. I can really feel that. The notion of looking out to the possibilities of growth, of embracing change. You've no idea how many people I meet who tell me they're very frightened of change. Are you one of those? It's a very common way of experiencing ourselves. But actually, if we were just to say, I'm frightened, rather than adding of change, you would know that change happens at 1 minute intervals, constantly. You know, a fall on a footpath, a jug slipping from your grip and smashing on the floor. Things happen in minuscule seconds. We can't plan ahead without thinking that things aren't going to constantly change. So to learn how to open to a new way of embracing is wonderful, and to live like that. Now, for those people who have found all of the new changes that have happened a rather open, exciting field of possibilities, I imagine that's because they've been doing that before. Those of us who lived with fear beforehand and very, very anxious thoughts will have discovered that this current situation opens up more fear and anxious thoughts. So I'm suggesting that when you start to look, that it doesn't have to be this way, that there is more beyond. There's this interesting Chinese proverb. I need to pick up my book to read this because I never remember it properly. Talking about uncertainty. It goes like this. If you want to know your past, look into your present conditions. If you want to know your future, look into your present actions. What do you think that means? We're here now. In the practice of mindfulness, we learn that what is available to us now is what we've gathered in our past and brought to this moment. So if you want to know your past, look into your present conditions. That's what arrived and brought you here. But if you want to know the future, look into your present actions. You see, if you embrace the field of possibilities now, then you will be able to see that you'll stay open to open-heartedness in the future. It's what we're doing now that plays a part on what arrives. So when you look at the fact of being able to embrace uncertainty, you come back again and again and again to the recognition that it's what you're doing now that enables you to do that embracing. It's how you see and live in the now, in this moment, and learn to let go the struggle for control, struggling for control. I would say that one of the most common conversations I have on a regular basis is the conversation about control and our fear of not having any. And yet I'd like to tell you that I live a rather interesting life and I don't think I've had control over anything in a long, long time. I don't want it. I rather like the notion of learning how to relax in the midst of chaos, not struggling against the chaos, but noticing that chaos is going to be happening on a regular basis. I love the notion of letting go attachment to outcomes. And one of the greatest outcomes that drives people is the belief that the outcome for everything we're doing should be some level of happiness. What would happen if you allowed yourself to let go the notion that you should be happy all the time and instead embraced what's here? You would learn to befriend sadness. You would learn to stay open to the message of anxiety. You would learn to give space and time to resentment, to hurt. You would learn to notice how often you hurt yourself. Striving, aiming to be happy all the time means that you have to try and control outcomes constantly. That's because we think that happiness should be the given outcome of anything we do, but not necessarily so. If you learn to live with just what's here, without attaching the outcome of happiness to you, then you'd recognise that you live a much more open life. Now, over the last few weeks, we've been looking at being in lockdown with difficult, uncomfortable thinking and feelings. And you'd recognise that there's a huge level of control that we're all trying to achieve through thinking. We think our way into anxiety because, oddly enough, we're trying to control the future outcome. And it's by doing that, by trying to make ourselves feel certain and safe, that we are controlling outcomes constantly, which means that we're struggling all the time. If we learned how to relax and embrace what is happening now, then, as the proverb says, you'll be able to more readily predict your future when you recognise that you learn to live into the now moments as they arrive. Can you see that? Sometimes it takes a bit of getting your head around. As moments arrive, it doesn't mean that embracing uncertainty means we're going to be helpless. It actually empowers you, because if you're open to the possibilities, then it means you have choices. I can change my attitude towards something. I can notice I was invested in an outcome. I can change my behaviour. I can alter. But I cannot change what's happening to me out there. I cannot change what life is putting at me. I can only change my reaction to it. If we think that we can control our lives, you know we all have another thought coming, because control means that we have to struggle. Learning to allow what is, staying present to what's actually happening, means that we can open our minds and hearts to embrace an awful lot more than just what was in our thinking minds. Back we go to the concept of beyond. You know, the other saying that I might suggest you write down if you're unfamiliar with it, that I've lived by for many years, is it's not what you're looking at that matters, but how you see it. It's not what's here in front of you, but how you interpret it, how you perceive it, what attitude you bring to it, how you choose to work with it, how you operate change within that, how you learn to see something and alter a perception around it. This is embracing uncertainty. It's not what you're looking at, but how you see it, what you can bring to it if you haven't got a rigid sense of it must be in a particular way. Understand that many of us live our lives constantly rowing against the tide, pushing water uphill, carrying a bag of rocks on our back, because we've made a decision that we want our life to be a particular way, that it needs to be in a particular way, that it has to work out how you have it planned, because that's what's going to make you safe. And then when you think about it, after that, the whole notion of something going wrong isn't that it went wrong, is that it didn't match your plan. We often say, my life is full of chaos, and yet, you know, we're full of chaos, and life is just doing what it's doing. Had you thought about it like that? Life is chaotic. It certainly is nowadays. Life is full of change. It's actually natural that change happens. This is how growth arrives. The whole notion of living and dying feels very chaotic to many people. But you know, new babies arrive, and we leave again at the end of our life. Plants arrive having died off for the winter. You know that this is how life is. The certainty of uncertainty is how nature has organised itself. Why would we fight against that? It's interesting that if we followed the seasons, for instance, which is an interesting thing to say here in the UAE, but if we get used to recognising that things have their life for a time and then they fall away only to produce new growth again, then you'd see the same thing happens for us. So part of my life some years ago, I studied horticulture and growing and became very interested in gardening, which is a sheer delight in New Zealand. The weather means that we have very profound seasons, and when you learn what grows where and when and why, you can grow some very beautiful gardens. But I remember one of my early lessons was about pruning, and in particularly rose bushes. So a rose bush in the winter time consists of something like 5 stalks. You know, if I used my hand to show you, I'd say this is a rose bush. It just looks like this. There are tiny little buds, little nubs of new growth, but there are no flowers, there are no leaves, and you buy it like that with a picture, a promise of this beautiful rose to come. And then you're given instructions of when, where and how to plant it and how to take care of it. And if you watch, you plant it in the winter time and it appears to be doing nothing, but deep under the ground it's growing its roots. We can liken ourselves to rose bushes because you know what happens. I delighted in growing roses. So the spring arrives and the little nubs shoot out growth, green branches. It's a sheer delight how quickly they grow, and it's a sheer delight how quickly they leaf up, and then the buds arrive. By the time you get into the spring, there's this great growth, and instead of being this high from the earth, the bushes have grown quite magically, and the plants, the flowers arrive. Now what happens next is that in order to keep the flowers producing, it's important that you deadhead them. You don't leave the dead roses sitting on a bush. You take off what you do not need. So once the roses, you pluck it away, and new growth, and new growth, and new growth. And at a certain time, if you want even more growth, you gently cut back. And this great bush of beautiful roses appears. The seasons go on, and you know what happens? We get back into the autumn, and if you want that bush to produce even more next summer, you cut it right back to the beginning again. I used to often be asked to go and do pruning of roses for people, pruning all sorts of different plants, and explain to people that how you put the pruning shears and where you cut produces the direction of the growth. We are like that. We as people, in order to cope with the uncertainty of life, need to be pruned. And pruning feels tough and it hurts. You know, I often used to say to the bushes as I was cutting them, I'm going to prune you so that you'll be even more beautiful. Thank you for what you've produced. But I think it's important to also say, when I'm telling you about growth, the best plants, the best growth and the most wonderful flowers arrive on new growth, not the old wood. You know that here in the UAE, if you look at what happens to our bougainvilleas, if they're cut back hard, they grow beautifully again. And how many times I've had discussions with people about how that needs cutting back, and they say, no, we'd lose the flowers. No, I say, if you were patient, you would get even more. I think that cutting and the notion of pruning is a certainty, and yet it's in our life something that feels so jagged and so uncomfortable and so raw. But if I was to ask you to take that analogy of growing roses, for instance, or cutting back the bougainvillea, you would know as well as I do that if you prune back well, the growth that comes can be amazing, especially if you tend with love and kindness and compassion to the plant. The same thing happens to us as people. We can learn how to live into the most astonishing uncertainty if we allow life to cut us, to hurt us, as it were, to cut away what isn't us. If we actually recognise that for us to really grow, we may have to alter our paths. We may have to alter the thoughts in our mind. We may have to alter our viewpoints. We may have to begin again with new belief systems. We may notice that we need to develop flexibility. We may learn to understand that real growth comes from removing that which we do not need, that which no longer serves us. I think often of talking to people about the maturity of emotional development. It arrives through the pathway of suffering, and many of us are discovering this now. You know, I sometimes think that my days are spent loving people who are suffering, loving people who are noticing that the belief systems that they've had their whole life feel inadequate now, that they're like computers that need updating, that flexibility needs to arrive rather than tightness, that certainty at times feels debilitating if only we could see it, and allowing something to be let go, to be surrendered to drop away, to be cut, to be cleaned, to be shed, to be released, means that a whole field of openness can arise inside of us. Learning to do that feels really tough. It requires a great deal of patience. I think it means that self-reflection is necessary. I'm curious, how many of us have taken up tasks of change during these last few months? Have cleaned out drawers or wardrobes, straightened and tidied things, found clothing that you don't need, discovered possessions that you haven't wanted, cleared out spaces, organised and altered things. That, you know, is a form of pruning. But it's also a way of opening space. Mindfulness practice teaches us how to open space. Mindfulness teaches us to make within us an open space, and in the openness to allow new growth. It's the opposite of clinging to ideas, beliefs, and notions that hurt us. The whole idea of cleaning and opening, making room in a drawer or a cupboard, is so that something new can be put in its place. The whole idea of pruning a rose bush is that new growth will appear. And if you learn how to prune well and wisely, the growth the following year can be simply astonishing. And the practice of learning how to do that with climbing roses, to get them to climb and to climb and to climb, is quite amazing. But this, you know, is what can happen to us if we don't cling to certainty. The words are embracing, opening, allowing, inviting. Can you think of more? Releasing, undoing. In the openness of that, there is a space. In that space lies our ability to make fresh choices. When we go for certainty, there's no room. When you go for the known, how can you open to new possibilities? When you do the same thing that you've always done, eat in the same restaurant you've always eaten in, drive along the same road, read only the same kind of books, listen to only the same sort of music, how can there be growth? How can there be an acceptance of a new way of seeing and being? And can you not see that this is what could be arriving for us now? How can you learn to open to this new field of possibilities? How can we learn to lean into uncertainty and recognise that in actual fact nothing has ever been certain? It was only thoughts. How can we learn to embrace change with an open heart and an open mind, an open space in which we can allow vast new possibilities? What would that mean for you? How could you apply that to yourself and to your daily life? What ways could you allow a cleaning of this, an opening of that inside of you? Do you know, I remember thinking when I first came here to live, how obvious it was to me that life in Dubai was about what happened on the outside, what things looked like on the outside. How often I met people who had changed since I saw them last, altered their hair colour, altered the shape of their faces, changed the ability to see how old they were, altered their clothing a great deal, but altered the external appearance. And yet nothing had changed on the inside. There was no growth, no depth. I think we learn this as children. To alter something, we have to do it so that it looks acceptable. We don't know that there's a vast array of possibilities within us. And as we grow and get older, we learn to recognise that the real deep work happens on the inside, not the outside. And this coronavirus time has given many people the opportunity to embrace life in uncertainty and begin to alter and change. The fear that comes with that needs warmth and kindness and attention. Now more than ever, we need to learn how to practice the deepest of self-kindness, the warmth of self-compassion, to prune away the things that will no longer serve us, to recognise that whilst we cling and clutch and grasp at what we know, we cannot embrace and face into uncertainty. So therefore we are feeding fear. So we clutch what we know and we imprison ourselves in the known. It's funny when I think of doing that, how it makes me clutch. What it feels like to learn how to throw your arms open, to open into a vast field of possibilities that you haven't even dreamt up, and learn to accept and appreciate that there could be much more, is what we've been given the possibility to do at the moment. There are so many people who have lost such a lot because of this. I'm so aware of that. Because of that, it's my intention that next Monday night we talk about loss and grief and grieving. We all of us have lost something. But do you know, the function of good grief is the housework of cleaning out a space. It's an opening and allowing of what is actually here within us, the the pain, the fear, and the anxiety. It's a tending to it. So we're going to talk about tending to grief. That arises out of tending to uncertainty. Because in many ways, there's a great grieving when you let something go. And when you recognise how you've been facing into life may have been quite constricting. But I would love it if you took from this evening the notion of learning how to let go being attached to particular outcomes, and learned to walk into the vast field of possibilities that's always there before us. The way to do that is actually quite a profound attitude change. So that's a new way of seeing. It's a new way of learning to open. I can't know any other way to do that except through the practice of mindfulness, where we learn to notice what our thinking is doing and how thoughts of fear and anxiety constrict us and keep us on a known path. How mindfulness teaches us to use our breath to breathe into and open a space within us. A big deep breath on a regular basis that makes us steady ourselves and lean into what we do not know, and allow for that to open into the vast pool of awareness that's available for all of us. When you think back to the beginning of our lives, that's how we all started. We, all of us, knew nothing more than what was just happening right now. And as babies and small children embraced it until we were taught by the loving adults around us to actually watch out, look out, take care, not enough time, etc. And we learned instead to feel safe with the known. Now I suggest that while you embark on a journey into the unknown, you have around you routine and structure that helps you to feel safe. But each day you make a choice to choose something new that you've never done before. See if you can find a whole new way of being every day. Try something new and different. Write it down. Seek out the times where you grasp and learn when your hand is grabbing to open it and embrace and ask yourself, what possibility could be existing here? What new person could I meet? What new book could I read? What new music could I listen to? What new way could I walk? Could I move? Could I drive? Could I see? Could I sing? How can I experience something new and different? Every day, search for something and tell yourself, I'm letting go my attachment to the outcomes from my thinking mind, and I'm opening instead to be able to embrace, don't call it uncertainty, but the vast field of possibilities that awaits me. There's going to be a vast amount of change arriving out of this. Don't lock it down, open it up. You have no idea what can happen when you meet it with an open mind and an open heart. The life has it for our growth. Life wants us to grow. We want us to grow. Open each morning when you begin the day. Today, I set my highest intention for my highest, greatest potential in everything that comes my way. And in doing so, I let go all attachment to all outcomes and open to embracing the vast field of possibilities that exists beyond my thinking mind. When you live like that, your heart opens. Try it. Make it your beginning for each day, and then write it each time you find something new. Teach it to your children. Feel the openness of your heart. As your heart opens, learn to breathe more deeply into it. You will find the spaciousness that arrives within you when you aren't clinging and grasping and controlling. The spaciousness that arrives when you can drop your shoulders and open your chest and embrace all that life has to offer. I know for many it feels very tough right now. But nonetheless, each of us have this moment. This moment. Take with me one really deep breath now. In through your nose. And feel it open up. And recognise that learning to breathe more deeply opens the field of possibilities. Learning to drop your shoulders, learning to open your body helps you to open your mind, which helps you to open your heart. Each morning, say to yourself, today I'm going to live in an open-hearted way, and I'm willing to begin to learn to embrace the possibilities that exist. In doing so, I embrace the fear and the anxiety. I thank it for what it teaches me. Let us know how you get on. I very much enjoy hearing from you during the week. And I'll very much enjoy meeting with you again next week and talking, focusing on grief, loss, grieving. Thank you for being here. Much love to you all.